The hall at Sterling Aerospace gleamed so brilliantly that you could see your reflection on the floor. Rows of black leather seats lined up precisely, while halogen lights shone down like cold in different eyes, illuminating every detail, every person. On the stage stood a modern aircraft engine, the RS-7000 towering like a metallic beast yet to be tamed. Value $2 million, repair time 3 days. Result every top engineer had given up. 200 people, engineers, executives, technical journalists packed into the room not out of hope but out of a collective hunger to witness a failure. The failure of someone they didn't consider worthy. At the center of the stage stood Camila Rodriguez, 28 years old. Deep brown skin, tightly curled hair, pulled back, dressed in a plain white shirt and faded jeans, no name tag, no uniform, no badge from any prestigious institution. Only a wrench lying at her feet just thrown down by CEO James Morrison, a white man with slicked-back silver hair, smiling as if he'd just caught an imposter, red-handed. "You think you deserve to stand next to my MIT engineers?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, each word slicing like a knife. "No degree, no certification, just a self-declared illusion. You've got 30 minutes. Fail and get out." The sound of metal hitting the floor rang out like a bell announcing the beginning of an execution. A young engineer scoffed. A female reporter raised her camera and muttered, "This is pure tabloid gold." And Camilla, she bent down and picked up the wrench with hands trembling, not from fear, but because the past was stirring in every fingertip. She looked up. Her dark brown eyes weren't defiant nor pleading. They held only the chilling calm of someone who had lost everything and now had nothing left to trade but the truth. In that room, heavy with power and suspicion, no one knew they were about to witness one of the most remarkable turnarounds in the history of aviation. Apartment 304 sat at the end of the third-floor hallway, in an old building in East Detroit, where the walls peeled and the sound of factories blended with the night wind. Camila Rodriguez lived there quietly, as if the world had forgotten her, and in some ways she had tried to forget herself too. She woke every morning at 5 a.m., not by alarm, but out of habit from her days as an engineer wake before the sun. Thick black coffee dripped into a chipped ceramic mug, the only thing remaining from her old Houston office. She often sat by the window, eyes drifting out toward the industrial zone in the distance, where steel cranes pierced the fog like memories that refused to die. Sometimes her gaze would linger for a long time, but like always, Camila would shake her head, snuff out the thought just beginning to spark, and stand like leaving a locked room inside herself. The neighbors called her kind. Savannah Taylor, the older woman next door, would often tell other tenants, "That girl's gentle, always willing to help." But there's something sad in her eyes, like she's carrying the weight of a world nobody else can see. No one knew Camila used to repair aircraft, used to walk among rocket prototypes, as tall as buildings, used to wear a blue lab coat, and speak directly with NASA project directors. She was just the library assistant, the shy black woman who handed out books to kids or fixed the loose wiring in the children's reading corner. Her wardrobe consisted of white shirts from discount stores and worn-out sneakers. No makeup, no rings, no visible sign of who she used to be. All of it was stored carefully in a wooden box under her bed. A PhD diploma from MIT, a NASA medal, and an engagement ring that had never been worn. Camila had chosen to live without noise, without being seen, because the world had taught her that if you're a black woman, no matter how gifted you are, the shadow of doubt will always loom larger than the light of your accomplishments. But one day she saw a job posting from Sterling Aerospace for a low-level technician with poor pay. Modest requirements. However, the name RS-7000 in the job description made her freeze. That design was hers. But it had been altered and could kill. And so Camila applied not to be hired, but to reclaim what had been stolen, and face the demon she thought she had already buried. When Camila Rodriguez turned 23, she stood on the podium of NASA, a place with few women, even fewer black women, and hardly anyone as young as she was. On the grand stage at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, under blinding lights and countless camera lenses, she wore a crisp navy blue suit. She stood beside the Orion engine prototype, a creation marked by her intellectual imprint, an advanced propulsion system that saved 40% in fuel and increased efficiency by 60%. Camila Rodriguez hasn't just helped take us to Mars, the NASA director declared. She's redefining the limits of aerospace engineering. The auditorium erupted in applause. But Camila searched only for one face in the crowd: Skylar Hernandez, her boyfriend collaborator, and the person she believed to be the missing piece in her life. He smiled brightly from the front row, and tomorrow they would submit their patent application together. The week after, they'd hold their wedding on the NASA campus, where they had lived and dreamed for years. But fate doesn't announce itself with thunder. It arrives in silence. That evening, Camila returned to the lab to retrieve her notebook. She didn't knock, just walked in, and froze. Skylar was hunched over a workstation, plugging in a series of external drives. On the screen were original data files, the designs she and he had poured their minds into. "Skylar, what are you doing?" He turned around. No panic, no denial. "Doing what I should have done a long time ago. Lockheed Martin is paying $50 million for this technology, all of it. To me." The words weren't a punch, they were a blade. Cold, precise, and straight to the heart. "This is our work," Camila said, her voice cracking. "NASA's. Hundreds of people poured their sweat into this." Skylar sneered, smirking, as if she'd just told a fairy tale. "Sweetheart, do you think anyone out there will believe a 23-year-old black girl is a genius? You were the perfect backdrop, smart, modest, hard-working, the ideal profile for the world to believe I was leading everything." And then the nightmare unfolded. When she tried to stop him from leaving, Skylar triggered the security alarm and accused her of stealing data. In the chaos, he destroyed the lab's firewall systems, causing a minor explosion in the pressure room, which resulted in severe nerve damage to her right hand, the one she had once used to sketch every component of the engine. 6 months later, she was investigated, terminated, and erased from all internal records. Thanks to forged emails, bribed statements, and doctored footage, Skylar was officially recognized as the project lead and signed a multi-million-dollar deal with Lockheed Martin. Camila had no choice with the system, and public opinion turned against her. One rainy night, she packed her belongings, her MIT doctorate, NASA medal, and the engagement ring he never gave her. No lawsuit, no protests. She withdrew and vanished. She didn't just lose her career, she lost faith. In justice, in teammates, and in herself. And so Camila Rodriguez, the aerospace genius, became the anonymous library assistant in the heart of Detroit. When Camila Rodriguez first stepped into the testing room at Sterling Aerospace, her heartbeat wasn't from excitement, but from a familiar nightmare resurfacing beneath the glossy surface and quiet hum of cutting-edge machinery. RS-7000. That name had chilled her when she saw it in the job posting. But it wasn't until she stood before it in the flesh-metal wires that she realized the full horror of what had been done. It was her Orion design. Not similar, not inspired, but a crude, twisted, and worse, dangerous copy. She circled the engine, not touching, only scanning with her eyes. The pressure regulator was misconfigured. The compression ratio exceeded safe thresholds. The resonant frequency was off. Numbers that weren't technically wrong on paper, but in actual flight could cause the engine chamber to rupture within minutes at 40,000 feet. A flying bomb packaged as a breakthrough. Camila had no doubt now. Skylar hadn't just stolen the design, he had sold it recklessly. And Sterling Aerospace, in its obsession with purchasing genius, had deployed it without understanding its structural core. Now in front of her, this wasn't just a job. It was the lives of hundreds of passengers who would one day sit on planes powered by the RS-7000. She could walk away just like 5 years ago. No one knew she had ever been Camila Rodriguez of NASA, No one expected anything from the library girl. They'd say she couldn't do it and bring in someone else. She could keep her peace. But if this engine flew and exploded, she would be the one waking up in the middle of the night with a single question haunting her. Why didn't I speak up? Back in her apartment, Camila sat by the window for hours that night. Her eyes no longer stared at the industrial zone. Her right hand ached as if reliving every explosion. She opened the wooden box under her bed for the first time in 5 years. The MIT diploma, the medal, and the ring. She picked up the ring and looked at the small stone, once a symbol of the future, now the remains of betrayal. Then she took a deep breath, placed everything back inside the box, and shut it. "If I don't speak up, who will?" she whispered. "And if not now, then when?" The next day, she walked into Sterling's hall, carrying trembling hands and a heart once shattered, but with eyes that had changed. No longer broken, but the one who survived. The air inside Sterling Aerospace's auditorium felt thick, as if everyone were collectively holding their breath, waiting for her to fail. Camila Rodriguez stood under the spotlight as though on public trial. No podium, no introduction, just a wrench on the floor, a silent challenge. Her right hand trembled slightly, a lingering echo from the explosion years ago, a reminder that this battle wasn't only against bias, but against her own body. CEO James Morrison strode past her, his grey suit pressed to perfection, voice booming like a propaganda loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, today you will see why Sterling Aerospace only hires the best, those with degrees, certifications, and clear resumes. And this girl here, no school, no experience, nothing, just a very confident mistake." Laughter erupted. Mia Lopez, head engineer, crossed her arms and scanned Camila from head to toe. She fixed cars in a garage and worked at a library, right? Oh, of course. A hidden mechanical genius nestled between children's books and jammed printers. Ava Taylor, a fresh MIT graduate, eyed Camila's right hand and sneered, "She's shaking. Probably never seen a real engine before. Just used to Lego models." Some reporters frowned, scribbling notes, prepping headlines like "Unqualified Woman's Challenges Detroit's Engineering Elite." Cameras zoomed in, capturing every sneer, but Camila didn't speak, didn't argue, didn't bow her head. Inside, her anger simmered not at the insults, but at how familiar they were. At MIT, she had to work twice as hard to be considered good enough. At NASA, all her ideas required triple the verification her male colleagues needed. Every award came late. Every nod came with suspicion. And now, after surviving it all, this room sought to reduce her to her appearance, her age, her skin, her gender, and her cheap coffee cup. James Morrison stepped beside the RS-7000 smug. "This design has a critical flaw. My MIT team spent 3 days and still couldn't find it. Now I hand it to her, a woman with nothing but passion." He paused dramatically, eyes sweeping the audience like a magician about to reveal a farce. "Camila Rodriguez, you have 30 minutes, and when you fail, you will let it be a lesson to every dreamer. Know your place." Camila said nothing. She approached the engine. The moment her hand touched the cold metal surface, a wave of memories crashed in the ozone smell of the old lab, Skylar's laughter, the look on her colleagues' faces when they heard she was fired. A mocking voice from the front row, "Need me to show you where the engine cover is?" Laughter again, louder, smugger. They were certain this was her collapse. But inside Camila's mind, the numbers had already begun. Pressure ratios, detonation temperatures, structural deviations. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was concentration. She was listening to the metal's voice, something they would never hear. In the next 30 minutes, their laughter would die. Time passed, each second, dragged by condescending stares and murmured chuckles. But Camila didn't flinch. She had once stood on NASA's stage and been handcuffed in its hallways for a crime she didn't commit. Today was merely the last echo of an old pain. Her right hand still trembled slightly, but the tremor became muscle memory every time it touched metal. She removed the protective cover, detached each sensor, and examined every connection. 20 minutes left. I don't think she even knows where to start, a male engineer chuckled, raising his watch like a countdown to a punchline. Camila didn't react. As soon as she removed the pressure modulator, everything inside confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't just a copy of her Orion design, but a dangerous butchered version made by someone who didn't understand the original mechanism. Wrong compression ratio, wrong resonance frequency, wrong pressure parameters at high altitude. If tested, the engine wouldn't just fail, it would kill people. 15 minutes. James Morrison leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, face smug with victory. "All I hear is metal clanging, Ms. Rodriguez," he said coldly. "You should probably call a car mechanic instead." Camila put her tools down. Her eyes no longer avoided theirs. They had become deep streaks of steel, calm, unwavering. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, a worn NASA brass pin held hundreds of times over the past 5 years. Etched in Latin ad astra per aspera, through hardship to the stars. She didn't raise her voice. Her tone was steady and clear. "I need a digital micro-modder and a Fluke 700 pressure calibrator. If the correct tools aren't provided, this engine will explode at standard cruising altitude." The entire room went silent. A few people sprang up from their seats. "What did you say?" Ava Taylor asked, voice urgent. "Explode." Camila didn't look at her. Her hands kept moving, her voice colder than steel. This design was stolen from a 2019 NASA prototype propulsion system, a terrible replica with completely wrong compression ratio, changed from 14.71 to 15.21. At 40,000 feet, resonance will strike the combustion chamber like a hammer, and the entire structure will collapse within 3 minutes. James Morrison snapped. "How do you know the resonance frequency?" Camila stopped, looked up. "Because I designed the original version. I warned NASA about that flaw 5 years ago, and I know exactly who stole it." The entire hall shook with shock. Mia Lopez staggered forward. "No, no way. The Orion design belongs to Dr. Camila Rodriguez, and she's either dead or in prison, or—" Camila calmly rolled up her sleeve. Her right arm revealed warped, scarred skin, evidence of the NASA explosion she had carried for half a decade. She raised it for all to see. "I'm not dead. I just disappeared from the view of those who believed I could never be who I am." A young engineer dropped his pen. A reporter stopped recording, eyes fixed on her. Once branded a traitor by NASA, Camila Rodriguez stood there correcting the flaw none of the credentialed geniuses had seen. She returned to the central computer with a few rapid commands. The screen lit up with the original Orion design bearing encrypted signatures and technical annotations, Rodriguez Susi NASA 2019. Then silently, she began calibrating the engine. Each figure adjusted precisely. Turbine speed 97,300 RPM. Fuel injection timing 23.7 microseconds. Bypass ratio 5.11. No one spoke. No one dared interrupt. They watched. When she sealed the engine casing, the monitor flashed all systems green. Stable, optimized, perfect. Camila turned around and placed her tools down. "It's done." A full minute of silence, not from a lack of words, but because no one could believe what they had just witnessed. The RS-7000 engine roared for the first time without shaking, overheating, or misreading. The sound was no longer just mechanical noise. It was a silent anthem of triumph, echoing through a packed hall where everyone stood frozen like statues. Camila Rodriguez lifted her hands from the control panel, gently wiping the sweat from her brow. Her right hand still ached, but it no longer trembled. Ava Taylor, who had mocked her shaky grip, stood speechless. Mia Lopez, who had dismissed her as an intellectual waste, gripped the side of her chair, face pale. James Morrison, the CEO who had once shouted into the mic like a preacher of prejudice, now slumped in his seat, as if his entire career had just slipped away. "Who are you?" "Really?" he muttered, his voice stripped of authority. Camila didn't answer right away. She unlocked her phone and held up the screen to a legal document. Cease and desist, immediate halt to unauthorized use of the Orion design. Federal-level intellectual property violation. Claimed damages $500 million. The room erupted. A cameraman dropped his rig. A technical director muttered, "Dear God." James Morrison barely whispered, "We'll pay anything. Make it right. Restore your name." Camila looked straight at him. Her gaze held no vengeance, only the wisdom of someone who had walked through fire and no longer needed anyone to hand her light. "I don't want money," she said. "I didn't come here to sue. I didn't come to destroy anyone. I came to fix a mistake that could have killed people." She turned toward the camera broadcasting live, her voice not loud but clearer than any microphone. 5 years ago, I lost everything because I trusted the wrong person and stayed silent in the face of injustice. Today, I'm not silent anymore. Not for revenge, but because I saw what they turned my creation into a machine that could kill. Then she pulled out a small handwritten note and placed it on Morrison's desk. "This is an invoice for technical repair service. Price $1. Morrison blinked. $1. Camila nodded. "Because talent should not be priced by gender, skin color, or GPA. It should be valued by its ability to protect life." The entire room held its breath. For the first time, she looked into the faces of every person who had mocked her just minutes ago. "You don't need to hire me. You need to change the way you think." She pointed toward the engineering team. "Ask yourselves how many women are on this team. How many people didn't go to MIT? How many were rejected just because of where they came from?" A man at the back murmured, "She just saved this entire company." Camila gave a soft smile, not smug but calm. "I didn't come to save anyone. I came to ensure no one else dies from what I once created." Then, like a quiet breeze, she gave a short bow, turned, and walked off the stage, seeking no title, expecting no applause. Only leaving behind one undeniable truth. A black woman, once erased from history, had just rewritten it through timely silence and a voice raised in the right moment. Camila Rodriguez walked off the stage, leaving behind a room full of power that had just been stripped of arrogance. The large glass doors opened, and the afternoon light of Detroit poured in like a different sky, one without cameras, without circuit boards, only the raw breath of a city that had seen enough stolen dreams. No one stopped her. No one dared. The people who had once sat highest, the CEO, the chief engineer, the media experts, now stood motionless like students called to the board without knowing the answer. Mia Lopez, who had scorned Camila with disdain, was the first to break the silence. She stood up suddenly, voice trembling. "Wait, Camila, we didn't know. We were wrong. Sorry isn't enough, I know, but..." Camila paused and turned. Her face held no hatred, only exhaustion, the kind worn by someone who had weathered every storm to preserve a shred of kindness. "Sorry doesn't change the past," she said softly, "but it can change the future if followed by action." James Morrison took off his suit jacket as if it had gained 100 pounds since she started speaking. "Dr. Rodriguez, Camila, we want you back. Any role, any salary. You could lead this entire industry." Camila shook her head. This time she didn't say no out of fear or for her past. She said no because she had found something more important than power. "What you need isn't me," she said. "You need a culture that listens to people who aren't like you." She pointed to the RS-7000, still humming flawlessly. "That machine doesn't care what school you went to. It only responds to those who understand it." A young reporter raised a hand. "Dr. Rodriguez, where are you going?" "Next. NASA, Boeing, Congress will probably want to speak to you." Camila smiled her first genuine smile since the ordeal began and replied, "I'm going back to the library." A soft shockwave rippled through the room. That's where the kids are kids who've never heard someone say they could be engineers or scientists. She continued, "I'm going to teach them to dream. Big dreams. And to never let anyone tell them that gender or skin color defines the limits of their intellect." She walked through the crowd. They instinctively stepped aside, creating a silent path of respect. No one laughed anymore. No one drafted headlines. They just stood witnessing the return of a legend they had once tried to erase. Just before stepping through the glass door, Camilla stopped. Sunlight framed her silhouette like a slow-motion scene. "Someone once called me a pretty ornament with no use," she said without turning around. "But flowers have thorns, and sometimes the thorns protect what's beautiful inside." And she walked out, not needing glory, because she carried it within. The following Monday, Camila returned to the small library in East Detroit. Under the window, a group of kids gathered around a miniature engine model assembled by her hands. A little black girl, 8 years old, asked, "Miss Camila, can I be an engineer even if I'm not good at math yet?" She knelt, her eyes warm. "You don't need to be good right away. You need to keep believing in yourself and never let anyone teach you how to limit your dreams." Camila no longer needed the world to recognize who she was, because now she was the one helping others recognize who they could become.